file is a F file using table is F# to JavaScript. And this is really an experience, hints on what I want to show. Web browser, open here, make a change in my file, such as Malaga. Will actually compile my to JavaScript behind the browser and message box. There's this build script run. I won't need to show you unless I have to spend a lot of that. So this tab you get when you're using a script thing called Fable. Curious about F#, it's a way of getting started because feedback and you can real things. So the first thing I'm going to need do some user fundamentally I want to implement is a Wikipedia starts and finds the most obscure jumps from Microsoft. You get unexpected results will be you never know. That I'll need some user interface play what my crawl going to use called Elmish, newer stock, important simple Elm sort of appeared in the Elm where I have some state is currently and I have some weapon. And in F it has records, which has several cases. Once you have these two things, you need some initials to your page. And you need a function that takes and calculates a new state. Calculate new state. That sounds really obvious. Function render this bit takes a state HTML. For triggering events you can later use to happens, but important part you have into HTML. Why this works? So we start with an empty as updates happen, and then every time the state and replace the whole HH with a new one. I implemented that. That's not replacing the whole DOM. So there's clever library. Take this and calculate the date DOM. So this is what there's the library and that full simple pattern work. So a very basic in F# would be my state is a string. Have my start with. I don't have any events, so it's type, which means nothing. My initial, to show you, date function takes and it now, so we just return the, and later, render function takes this trick you can attach to Java things later on. And I have this language where you can, so this says create the question mark, which lets you put anything here, lazy to read the HTML, and I create using in my index as this initial state, and I think I have to go. So if I save this is my hello. I have no events. Nice structure that you crawling, and start by defining that I'll need and actually do the crawling bit. Crawling the web. So this is where I keep all the pages and the way I'm going to is that's an immutable just to sort of I'll have a list of pages. Microsoft links to corporation 4, Microsoft, and then a list corporation 4. I'll have another record and all their direct information. So you have one event page, when it has two strings, so whenever you report, add a page to there. My initial state this chord, which is kind of like class mutable. Now I need the event in my update function. What to do here is to use which is kind of and is if the event then extract the source packaged inside this event, some stuff with this. One event now, but add more things here. You could handle them as separate. One event and thinking because there's a logic. So we want to add to the links attached to this source to go to my which has pages. Try find it has for the source. This can actually be empty. If this is empty, an empty list or the list with a source. It has this nice thing called here, which is a bit type that says this can it's checked. So I have to explicitly it won't compile. And now we state we're going to be this a new mapping to all the lay and the new page that I just sort of adding something state of downloaded pages, and I think that's the last rendering. So how this treat it. So I'm going to for a list and a render page, and let's start with my good source for jokes, and we're going to say render page. Well, I'm currently rendering access to all the other, and it's going to do. We're going to say page. So this text mark P to insert the HTML. Could get all the nest and state has, and here we can find the rendering, and this can be visited the page yet. So we'll have to say then just use empty list, and for all the nested, we're going to generate a new element by calling page P. Now there's a link render page from itself and F# Woodley, so that sort of calls itself pages. Couple of samples where all the important things from my, and if I save this now here, then you'll see there's visual F#, which is going to be great. Although F# is open source, but this is great. Windows, all the 11 million sample of what you can find on Wikipedia. So, and that's this bit of code. Now we create the app which we can trigger to add events, add page events, and add pages. Now we should actually, since that's what the one bit of code that branch, because it's these two things. The first half of the parse page function, HTML, and then hex, and that's the one thing that F#, if you need to do regexes, it's so what it does, title of the page, and it the links have this proxy because you can't make main requests to Wikipedia. The proxy that sort of and sends them back to my browser. It just extracts stuff from a web page. Download is this XML HTTP dynamic and it's this page URL actually finishes are all configured. All this cont function result of parsing. So this now I can say the root and title and just to show you that this actually, if we save it, here's a dump of all it sort of runs stuff and downloads link. So this works to write the crawling bit part, and again we'll have to call itself, and we're URL, and we're remember where we come from, sort of source link crawl. We're going URL and links. New page, new link, first to the current one, one link. Then so the way I pick some random links, we could crawl all of them, a lot of them, so I might not be happy about that. We're going to say links, take a random from this list, maybe let's do 2 for fun, and we're going to start crawling and string for the sort of that we visited. Save this, a bunch of things, fairly randomly all these crawls in parallel. I'd better do something soon. It also, I think going up and up, use the Wi-Fi, it might so some sort of way of stopping. So I'm going to add a parameter which I'm going to decrement new crawling for, and also is 0 if then do all this, do nothing, and 4 we should get. We'll see what we get. I think that's right. And for every level, so we have Russian encoder, okay, great, and Bing sunrise calendar. At least we have. Now it actually stopped. So it's now the one thing when I run it now, it's randomly because it does all. And great, you off but run control over how the parallel. So maybe processes doing the crawl, but if analyzing with every you'll get sort of n very soon, and so do is to sort of do, and then when this finishes, and this is in functional programming, think passing style. What was an obscure function, but it's your only in JavaScript. JavaScript 8, which is sync. So, well, the JavaScript continuation passing style sounds less obscure, but other. So the functional programmers sometimes that you really write functions result, and when they do is that they don't say return, call some other done. So they take this continuation, when they finish, they call it when they're done, and at the end. Typically in write something like this, called copy, that it reads the source data to the target, right, data target. The continuation bit, I say copy source into call when I'm done. I say read source, called when it's done. It writes the data, then gives it a function, and then when that's done, function that says we're all done. This is like the most confusing thing in the whole talk, but is you have to sort of write code where you never read applications saying more stuff. And what we've already here in the download was download at the end. Like we can return the downloaded HTML. Well, only system decides that the page and gives us that you sort of any asynchronous. That's what functional people call in JavaScript. Then that's based. In JavaScript, that it's not too. Really just how be. The point is style without any. So I can function so that it's based on that. It takes a continuation, and then it reaches. I'm finished. Then crawl. We can say first crawl has finished. Second crawl are done. Here I just have to give it some sort of when do nothing, and then you'll see that download works. Sort of linear. Sort of goes and then so goes deep, goes back, finish, and so on. So that's not doing any parallel synchronous. It doesn't. I could start this in parallel and have a nice assault Dallas left field and close. So now I've actually implemented what it's ugly. So next is, and this is basically so async code like this, and to extract some of it in this style of programming. I'm going to define a type. async, which represents an async that will produce a value. And this has a fairly tricky looking. So I have a more detailed. So this has a has a unit, and that's a function that turns a unit. So is this function another function, and then and how can you guess when you have t? When you give it a continue, sort of call this when it starts doing some return anything, it just sort of fades somewhere, starts the download or something like that. When download's finished, or when it passes the continuation event, have a computation, you can say, when you're done, I'll do some more work. So that's really the pattern that we've in all the code. I start some work stuff. We can change our code that it rather long type that returns one of these async, and now function that turns an asynchronous string and string list. So it's just all I'm doing is refactoring, sort of defining type and of code reusable function. So now our crawl function is I have download async, but I have sort of doing the next step. The function to actually implement in this whole talk on a function called afterward, we'd call it then, or in F#. So I had to and an async when it finishes, and that's asynchronous, and there is going to be an async. Okay, we're going to when that someone wants to start the session, we're the act inside the first async. So that's G call it, or bit of work result. Now call this function here. We sort of want to first thing finishes, second thing, and when that finishes, a whole composed thing. So this is the talk that I think everyone to sort of make, and I'll have a look at that and sort of power. But it's basically extract chaining logic into a function where now I can load the URL and or the title and the links from. Just a way of sort of chaining that I previously had. There's one here which is this continuation around of hidden this into some reuse. And here asynchronous operation that need one more helper, an async when it gets started immediately with a given. In the code using I need one more helper. Takes an async and says ignore whatever it, and now I say it still does. So what I've done in the last is just functionality into type, some of the logic into that type, but I think anything new is common pattern, and looks pretty ugly, which is deal with next. It's time for the now, because implementing here programmers. And not really interested what I'm showing here, but everybody the mythical M words as well. And this means it's just this captures two functions that I've just. So we implemented this function T to async of this says computation and asynchronous that whenever produces this value that when is this value immediate asynchronous. Afterwards functions. I've got an async produce a value of type T function that when it produce a new a return something. I sort of compose the link that will do this, then do this. So it's just sort of chainless operations. That there's many different have functions that, and so programmer would think. Just capture a mathematician community says, oh, difficult primitive algebra, and which is just a functor in the monoid, just more functors because we use words that nobody. But really, in pattern, there's a common. It's helpful to give the common because you then can say, oh, so we have after this sort of call some function to get do another async, create a primitive async. Now the useful is that there's lots of computations then you can syntactic sugar structures. And that's so I can go here, this thing called computation builder, and this is an F# way of it will have some methods on it. It will have are really just written before, but into a named thing. I'm going to be using the beams here, but they're really just sort of already. And this is our way of saying sort of the async, which supports some nice, and these members matter because the EF specifically for in this operation. So what can we do with this async? If you've seen async of JavaScript, this is you set brackets around the function else unit anymore. I'm in an async block inside my code, exclamation mark syntax, like normal let, but it's bind primitive languages. This afterwards, and you can also do, which is like evade, sort of binding the. So I sort of nicely all this horrible. Whenever you want to do something else, you end up, and if you're up, you're sort of slowly out of the screen. Just normal code that says download link page, do one crawl, and this actually works. Let's change it. Now I should be sort of, but longer. Microsoft, anything crazy here. Internet. Oh, so code that does what I actually looks nice, and I'm going to do one. Is, well, if we want to times a natural, this is where things get, because it's sort of for loop inside, and here, like this can't really automatically loops if it's not sort of blocks of code things. So is you can add additives to these computations, like for, where a list of the for loop basically, then you have to do your own for loop here. If the list is empty, we've finished do some shit. If the list is followed by more elements, we want to run the body command and then do basically sort of on all the remaining elements. This has to be enough. So it turns out you can use these extra in terms of the other for loop. They don't do anything. Not empty. There's body loop on the rest. And now I can, so let's change it. It's nice that here, it's kind of nice to see how things popular. It would be good if it actually worked again. I've exhausted my alarm. We've got for loops. Now we've ended up with some kind of asynchronous code in JavaScript 8 or in F# using ifs, where you wrap code in this A or you mark function, and then inside that you can use F# does work, but all normal constructs like the other thing that's really link or while loops all be implemented by sort of special operations. So we've implemented asynchronous abstraction just based on this. You'll represent continuations. That we're building is some of it ahead doing some work, and then what I showed you async. So it turns out, well, F# obvious, and it's kind of done, except this continuation section, it takes one more for exception, more for cancellation handle, and it also token automatically let you cancel and check for this. That's one thing we in C# explicitly pass cancel. EDS, so F# this is just a library, do more work in the library, and F# does is. Interesting thing that's slightly different here. It's sort of the same, but rather this sort of composable functions that are functions. It ugly function has some state in it, packaged in an object in it, and call different bits of code as functions, the state to a number, which bit of code to run. And hidden in behind the scenes, so you say work and then set state, and when this work finish, back in, do the set state back in, and so on. The thing about this is that it needs, which is why C# does it. Aside from there, doing the same thing, which mechanisms. And that's really, so I think there's the waypoints. This, if you want to try this F# compiler called Fable user interfaces, you can do this. With the Node ecosystem start, and it will behind the scenes. Interested in web, fun way to play with. The other thing is the F# world often think, and they often talk these sort of unions with, but functions are modeling too. I think type was basically a function. You have to learn how to read these things. Then you look at a really good idea of what's going on. And finally, async and await that actually these days aren't really move. Hopefully the idea of the sort of work that's happened when these execute to implement them yourself, many import those, know how they work behind the scenes. For me, thank you. I think we've questions. If anybody wants to public, you can now, but have a break and wants to chat. What's the best starting point? So I think the way I start Fable with getting started, just follow these. So what does it say? Fable 2 minimal sample. So just npm install npm. I think that's sort of .NET new thing. Yeah. There's a bunch of different things. Fable 2 sample, the minimum what I was using, and does it have an Elmish one? Doesn't seem to. So there's which is the safe stack, more integrated samples, which also includes, and there should be also a version there as well. I think Elmish has its own. If you search for Elm, there's getting started. Yeah, it will think, but the Nibble and Elmish people is that they, which is a rare, and the Fable IO starting point. Any other questions? Right, well then, conference and if you want to chat some more.